So are there any questions about any of that? It's a lot of material, right? It's like, boof, mastering, like heaps of stuff going on. Just for the rest of the class now, I just wanted to actually open that session, that We All Want To session, and then let's have a look at what we do with it, right? So given that we know that this is what mastering is and what we need to achieve with it, the next point is to then connect that up to our sessions. And so, as I said in the opening, that the normal workflow is that because it often involves a specialist mastering engineer, or mostly involves a specialised mastering engineer, unless it's a DIY project or a super low budget project. The concept is that you produce a mix file, and then you're not limiting for loudness when you mix. You're just getting a good mix. And then as a separate stage, the mastering engineer will then get your mix and bring it up under all of this processing for limiting and EQ and various sweetening things to adjust. And then the mastering engineer will be the one who will raise the apparent loudness so that the track is where it needs to be in terms of its LUFS level, or and whatever you've agreed with the mastering engineer you want in terms of apparent loudness. And that's going to change. If I'm an EDM producer, my requirements for loudness are going to be pretty different than if I was an acoustic folk producer and so on. But it's the mastering engineer where that's done. So just reviewing the workflow process, the usual procedure is that you will produce a mix and you'll bounce that to disk as a finished mix file, and that while you're mixing, you won't be worrying about apparent loudness at all, right? You'll just be getting your mix to sound good. And then as an entirely separate stage, that stereo mix file will get loaded into a DAW again, and then any of those sort of really subtle refinements will be made. And then at the end of all of that, then a limiter will be applied to bring the overall mix up to its target delivery level. That's the professional production workflow. The question is, well, what do I want you guys to do? You don't necessarily need to do the two-stage process, so you don't necessarily need to spit out a mix file, although you might want to, because you might want me to. I can turn your processing off when I mark your assignments, but you could spit out a mix file which was just your mix, and then you could create a new Pro Tools session and just import your mix file and then just do what I'm going to be doing to it here. But it's quite an interesting thing. A lot of people who mix, myself included, will bring a limiter in to the mix on my master bus as I'm mixing, so that I can hear the effects of what the limiter is going to do to my mix, because sometimes that will change the judgments that I make about balances, for example, because once you're pushing hard up against that limiter, then mix balances don't work in the same way that they do when you're not limiting the mix. You push one thing up and then you lose something else, and because it's an absolute ceiling, right? So what I tend to do, and what a lot of people do, is I will put a limiter on my master bus once I've got the mix basically working, and then I'll bring it up to a sort of a competitive level, and then I'll be making my finer mix decisions based around hearing it as it's going through a limiter. Okay, and then if I'm sending my work off to my mastering engineer, which I would normally do, then I will take the limiter off at that stage and then give him the unlimited mix. And then, I think I mentioned it earlier, I will also have my limiter on, and I'll say, Matt, that's my reference, like that's how I had it, and that's kind of loud enough for me or whatever, so just do your thing. If you can get it sound better, that's great, but that's how loud I got it with my own resources, and then he'll go off and usually do a better job than me. So that's the kind of idea. So for you guys, you can just put a final limiter on your mix output and do this all within one session without having to go through the two-stage process. I don't mind if you do that, but some of you may just want to do it because it's super interesting just to have your mix file and then have your mastered file and put them into iTunes and compare, right? And just see what the difference is. Obviously, there's going to be a huge difference in loudness, but then if you turn Soundcheck on in iTunes, for example, then it's going to be more level matched, and you'll hear what you did to it in the mastering phase independently of the loudness adjustments.